Hey everyone, welcome to the Gaslit Truth Podcast. You made it here. I am therapist Jen here along with my co-host, Dr. T.
You got it. I'm right
Dr.
here.
T. I just made that up.
I'm
Dr. T. How does that sound?
You're not the first one to say that to me, by the
Oh,
way.
really? All right, I'm going to get more
No.
creative then. I'm going to get more creative with that. Well, we are really glad you guys made it today. We're here, we're jacked up, and we've got a fantastic topic to talk about today.
Interesting. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, no, it's
Mhm.
fantastic. And actually, off the air before we started, Dr. Teralyn says, I got just enough information to be dangerous with this. That's yes.
Yes.
That's not our slogan for the show. I don't know what is. So um,
Right.
so before we start, something we want to remind everybody to is make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe, give us some comments, tell us what you think. If it's one of the first times that you've listened to our podcast on some of the platforms, the audio platforms, they're going to ask you to rank it. Okay. There's stars. Give us some stars. Like
Give us all the
all the,
stars.
I want, there's 5 there. I'd like you to give us 6. And if you give us 1, yeah, whatever. It's fine. I don't
If you
really
don't
care.
give us one, that's
Please
just
don't
not
do
even
that. Maybe,
fair.
you
We're
know
a
what?
small little thing trying to do something here.
I really
Give us
don't care
5
then.
for
I
effort,
don't
at
care. I don't
least.
care. You give us 1, it's fine. Like, obviously, we're not the podcast for you. So here we are already influencing people, telling them
Oh,
what they
yes.
have to do for us.
Oof.
Yeah,
Oof.
here we go, which is the whole
The
topic.
whole talk. Exactly, exactly. But
Damn it.
wait, we need to share some comments that we
We do.
got. So we
Yeah,
got a
we
good
do.
comment, and I want everyone to
Yeah.
hear it because it's
Yeah.
important to share your truth with us.
Yes, we want to know. We want to know what you guys think. And
Mhm.
so this comment came from someone who's listening,
In
all the
Florida.
way in Florida,
Florida.
which I'm very
Yay.
jealous of this
Me
person
too.
because I do know that they shared a little bit with me about going there, and they do the whole snowbird thing, and I'm like, oh gosh,
Caw-caw.
because we're way up here. Caw-caw, caw-caw.
Caw-caw.
Is that the sound a snowbird
That's the
makes?
sound of a snowbird that it came full circle. Jen was on the air this morning, and they were talking about
Oh my
golf.
gosh, golf.
And,
I was
she starts
challenged.
yelling, "Caw-caw,
Oh my
caw-caw,"
god,
on
right
the
on
air.
the
So we're
air,
just
right?
bringing it
Like,
up we're bringing it home right now,
this is
yeah.
what you wanna hear from a morning show, like, host, right? Who's supposed to be, like, just giving people information, and here I am getting quizzed on golf, and all I can say when someone says eagle or birdie is, "Caw-caw."
I'm
Like, I
texting
don't
her.
did
I'm
she
texting I don't know if
I
she
don't know.
got it while she was live, but I'm like,
Did
"Caw-caw, I'm dying." Okay.
Okay, so we digress back to our snowbird friend who had
Yes.
sent us a little bit of information. So the feedback that we got was so she says, Jen, I just want you to know that I really am enjoying what you and Dr. Teralyn are doing on your video podcast. So I know that she is watching on
On
YouTube,
YouTube.
which
Ah.
is fantastic. So
Promise
she's
we'll get Jen's lighting right.
She's I know. It's like, I can't. I know. I have tried to turn a basement into, like, a
A
production
studio.
studio. This is what
Right?
she got, like, I mean, you got a
We'll
dog,
get
so
you
that I
there.
know,
We'll
I'll
get
get
you
there,
there.
I know.
Yeah.
This is a
Mhm.
honeydew project of lighting. Like,
Oh,
I'm not
yes.
gonna put the lighting in,
All
but
right. I'll put the project memo in for you. Maybe it'll
yeah.
light a
Could
fire.
you
I
put
don't
a
know.
work order in for
I
me
will
so
put
I
a
can
work
get my
order
lighting
in.
fixed? Thank
Yes.
you. I appreciate that. Okay.
Okay, got it.
So this listener says to
We'll
us,
get to the comment, you guys.
I know
We'll get there.
I know
Oh.
she watches on YouTube though, which is very cool. And she just says, I'm really into everything that you guys are saying on your podcast. It is also, she says, it's so refreshing to see a young person getting it. And I was like,
Really talking to
she
you,
talking about Terry?
talking directly to you.
Which feels really good, because I was like, okay, because the last big compliment we had from a listener was really directed for Terry, and the change she made in somebody's life. And so this one has a little bit more swing for me, so it feels good, right? Because I'm like, oh, she be talking about you. You're young at heart. You're a lot younger at heart
Oh,
than I
oh,
am. I think.
thanks.
How's that? How's that feel? Okay, so
According to
anyways,
my dentist, my gum line is young for my age too.
oh,
Just so you know,
good.
yeah, I know, right?
See,
Like it's been validated dentally. Mhm.
I yeah, like stupidest shit we say, like, yes, all right, validate me mentally. Okay.
Mentally.
All right. So
Mhm.
that was a compliment we got from one of our
Yes.
listeners who's in Florida. So thank you for that.
Thanks for
We
listening.
thank you for
Yes,
listening, and we appreciate
we
knowing where
do.
you're at. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's cool. So we'll start with that lightheartedness and remind everybody again, feel free to send us your comments. You can DM us on
Mhm.
any of our socials. You can
Send
go
us an
ahead and
email,
send an
you know?
email at the gaslit truth podcast at gmail.com if you like emailing, because we are archaic and we still use email.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're also interested in listener stories to be on the podcast with
Hmm.
us. So if you
Yes.
feel like you have a good story or a story that resonates with others and you'd like to venture on the air with us,
Yeah.
please reach
Yeah.
out.
We've
Yes,
got it. We've got a handful of people
we
that we are
do.
schedule that have asked to come on the show. A few which
Mhm.
asked right away within like our first
Yes.
episode airing, and I was like,
All
"Oh,
right.
you guys are ballsy. Like, you know,
More ballsy
maybe
than
you
me.
should wait till you watch and listen for a
Yeah.
month or two, and then ask to come on the
Exactly.
show
So if
because
you
you're
like what you hear and maybe you wanna come on and
ready."
you think you can, get between the 2 squirrels, then let's go.
Good
But
luck. Yeah, here
yes,
we go.
good luck.
So
Good
thank
luck.
you. Thank
And,
you to our listeners.
yes, are you gonna
And
volunteer as
yeah.
tribute? So anyway.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
yes.
All
All
right,
right.
what are we
So
talking about, Dr. T? What's up?
well, we have okay, so Jen and I were talking about, what this episode is going to be, and we wanted it to be an episode about influence and people who have great influence on us and why they do and some of the problems with that influence. And even when I heard the commenter, which I greatly appreciated, she said, I think you said everything that you say, right? Like everything that you say resonates with her or something. I can't remember
Oh,
exactly,
yeah,
but
that feedback we had from one of our
no,
commenters.
just
Oh,
today,
I thought you
the
were
one
talking
that
about
you
the other
read.
one from 2 weeks ago. Oh, the one I
No,
read. Yeah.
the one that you
Yeah,
just read
I
today,
think
although we
she
appreciate it, but
everything. She said, really into everything you're saying. So refreshing.
everything you're
Yeah.
saying.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, that's influence, right? That's influence. And I get that on my TikTok a lot too, because I have a large following over there. And I'll get people to be like, I just love everything you say. I love, and I'm like, caution, caution, Will Robinson, danger, danger,
Ah,
you know?
whoa,
Whoa. Yeah,
whoa.
exactly.
Yeah.
Cause don't be so influenced by everything that we say that you
Yeah.
don't think for yourself anymore, right?
That's true.
The whole key of this podcast is like we're going to give you some alternatives, but we want you to
Mhm.
come up with your own facts
Yeah.
and
Your own truth.
thoughts and your own
Yep.
truth about this. It's not just
Yeah.
our truth and you need to think like we do.
Yeah.
It's it's your truth and maybe we can help you shift a little bit or just consider a few more things. So, we're talking about influencers and the larger influencers and I said to Jen, I said the original influencer is Oprah Winfrey.
The big O.
The big O,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
she in my world, she was the original influencer,
Yeah.
particularly for middle-aged women. I think part of that is because her show was on, during the afternoon. So
Yeah.
you hit a lot of that category and people who are also watching um soap operas like my
Oh,
mother would watch General Hospital incest. She still does.
yes.
She still does,
Yes.
all
Yes.
these years. So anyway, and I said to Jen today, I said, I actually met Oprah Winfrey one time. She would never remember it clearly ever because I went to one of her shows.
I can't believe you met Oprah.
I did. I met Oprah,
Fantastic.
and I was disappointed not in her, but in her show at that one because I was like, "Oh, we're gonna get a good juicy show," and it really wasn't. It was a
Oh,
show so this was back in the '90s, because I graduated early '90s, so I was still in college, and I had just gotten off my internship at Good Morning America, and I was like, "Hey, you guys, we should go and see a show, like, go see a televised show," and so I took a few of my classmates, and we went to Chicago, and we saw the Oprah show.
yeah.
And after the show, you got to hang around and shake hands and do all that crap, right? So that's how I met Oprah. That's the story about Oprah. But at that time, she was influential in a way. She was a middle-aged African American woman. And she was she open with her story at that point? I don't think she had to be quite then. I
No,
think she was a underdog basically who, made it big at that point. And it was later that her personal stories of abuse and things came out
Yeah.
in her shows. And now I said, fast forward to a couple weeks ago when she had a big televised show on about GLP-1s and weight loss. And it's funny
Yeah.
because she's influenced the weight loss community probably more than anything else. Women who
Yeah.
resonate with her about her weight struggles, right?
Yeah.
I remember when she did a whole big episode and she dragged like fake fat, or maybe it was real fat, out on a wagon because she had lost a ton of weight.
Oh, I
And
wanted
then
to
they
show a visual.
wanted to show the visual, and she had done it
Yeah.
by some crazy diet, and she lost it really quickly. There was that one, and then I remember another episode she had on Fen. I don't know if you remember Fen. Then we were
I
talking
do.
about Fen and how great that was, and now we're talking about GLP-1s and how wonderful that is, and I'm
Mhm.
like, gosh, this influencing thing is massive. Like, it is
Mhm.
massive on diet culture and other things, and who
Yeah.
doesn't wanna be like Oprah? I mean, you think about Oprah's favorite things.
Yeah.
If you get on the Oprah's favorite things list, your product
Oh,
is gonna be
skyrockets.
yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're
because
golden.
she
You're set.
influenced you
Mhm.
to purchase it,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's how that happens on television. She hasn't had to do she's not on social media. I don't see her doing any of that stuff because everybody knows her enough.
Yeah,
So then
she doesn't have
yeah,
to.
she doesn't have to. So now we work into the influencers of today, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways. I mean, social media with algorithms is one of the biggest ways that we become influenced, but it's all there's a good side, and then there's the dangerous side, and then there's the real side,
Yeah.
So I've lived in the real side of this, and I'm going to talk about some of that here too, because I think it's worthwhile to discuss,
Yeah.
And there's some other people we're gonna talk about too. One is, Jay Shetty, that just came out.
Not
And
too long ago,
Jen has
yep.
more information about Jay Shetty, and I think,
Yeah.
yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the influence of Jay Shetty?
So, I have to be honest with him, I did not realize how big he was, okay, until I started reading a little bit more about him. When I say big, I mean, like, I had heard his name, and I actually didn't
Mhm.
know too much about him until the controversy about him came out. It's not even controversy, it's the shit he lied about is really what it is. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even need to, like, call it that, right? And so, for those of you who maybe don't know too much about him, he is a pretty significant influencer.
Mhm.
So far, so as to his, he has a lot of celebrity clients. He's a coach, right? He's
Mhm.
a life coach. You can, for like $7,400, you can actually join the Jay Shetty Coaching Institute.
I think I'm gonna do that today. That sounds
I was looking it
wonderful.
all up. And what's so crazy, so I'm gonna go around a little bit, but one of the things that he was pegged with is listing off affiliations to
Oh.
accrediting bodies as part of his coaching program that were not real either. And so, as some of these
Wait,
lies,
hold on. The accreditation wasn't real, or the bodies?
so
Or
no,
both?
the relationship he had with them. So
Oh.
basically, it'd be like you and I tagging, I don't know,
Harvard
Purdue or
med. Yeah,
Harvard University Medical School,
right.
on all of our things, when
Okay.
we don't have an accredited relationship
Or
with
any
Harvard Medical
relationship
School.
or
Right.
affiliated relationship.
Right,
Okay.
so that was
Right.
something I didn't know either as I was reading about him. So even his advertising, not only of himself and where
Mhm.
he has been and what he has done, but also his product he created, which is this coaching program, right? Which
Okay.
he has got tons of celebrity that he's done coaching with, right? I mean, my gosh, he married Ben Affleck
Right, he was the
and
officiant.
J-Lo. He
Yeah,
was
he
the
was the
officiant of their
officiant.
wedding. One of his best
Mhm.
friends is Kim Kardashian, like, me too, I know. So it's kinda like I'm like, "Okay, Jay, whatever." I just had lunch with her last week,
Well,
so
he ran in the circle of influence, which
he
is
did. He
which
did.
is a slippery slope, especially if you're not presenting yourself authentically, I
Right.
think. And then
Right.
then over time, like, you just work your way into this, avatar? like the
Ooh,
expected avatar, right?
right. There you
Like,
go. Yeah.
so this is the
Yeah.
expectation of you. So this
Mhm.
is where you are pushed to be.
Yeah.
And I think if we tie that back into Oprah for a second,
Yeah.
I think the difference maybe is, and she's been in, I don't want to say conflict, but she's had her moments over the life where people dig into her life, but she's also been very open and clear about who she is, I think.
Yes.
Like, I think that's
Yeah.
the difference. Like, she's been very
Yes.
open. Controversial, I think, is the word I'm looking
Yeah.
for. Even though some of the stuff I don't agree with, she's always just been very open about it. In my opinion, if you guys think that's wrong and you have an example, let us know.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion, and I think it's easy to work your way into being what you think other people want you to be, okay?
And that's kind of I wonder that, honestly, I wonder
Mhm.
that when it even comes to the stuff with Jay Shetty, okay?
Yeah.
And that exact question is really I actually thought about this for this man because
Yeah.
he's very creative. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like he's a self-help like guru he's been
Yeah.
labeled, right? He went, and indicated to the world that he went and studied in India
Yeah.
under these Buddhist monks for a very, very long time,
Mhm.
and so he took what he learned and then he talked about some of his history. Okay, he's an author as well, so he was in
Yeah.
school. He talks about his history with that, and I wonder for him if he got just a taste of what he could stretch the truth on, right? And that people wanted to
Or
hear.
or just perpetuate the truth, like,
Yes.
so I
Yes.
wanted this morning, my husband yelled, get in here, the Golden Bachelor's on
Oh.
Good Morning America," and I was like,
Oh.
"Okay," and so I went in there and, they just got married in January, and now they are announcing their divorce, and, yeah, right? But they were together and all these things, and I looked at him and I said, good for them because they announced it first. They authentically announced it, and
Yeah.
they didn't pretend to be anything that they weren't immediately, right?
Oh, sure.
Immediately. Yeah, and
Sure.
I'm like, they
Yeah.
didn't get lost, and maybe that has to do with age. I don't know,
Sure.
experience, age, whatever, not giving a fuck. I don't know. Um, but I think when somebody like Jay Shetty, right? Like, he has built this for decades, like, he's been
He
around
has.
for a long time,
Yeah.
and suddenly it comes out, people are questioning him, and he has to stick with the narrative, right?
And
Because
that's what got him and that's what
yeah.
got him caught, right? So
Yeah,
that's
it's like
really what
going to
got
a
him caught.
party and meeting a
Yep.
new person, and
Yeah.
you forget to ask their name, and now it's too late to ask their name, like,
I know. No, it is, and I mean, his meditation startup, I was looking some stuff up on him, is valued at, like, over $2 billion.
good
So
lord.
this guy, I mean, he has lived lies, right? His whole
Yeah.
entire basis was talking about that he went to India for, like, 3 years and spent 3 years in a
Did
temple
he
in
not?
India
Did he not?
with a bunch of Buddhist monks. And so what ended up happening is a reporter, okay, was
Hmm.
tasked with his story and actually writing a story about him. And what
Okay.
ended up happening is as this reporter dug into Jay Shetty's story, which is he watched all the videos he did. He read all of his books, right? Like what any
Mhm.
reporter would do. He found holes, and there's time frames in this guy's life where he says, "Here's where I was doing this." And then another media outlet, he said, "Well, no, I was here doing this during that time frame." Right? He says he's
Oh.
with these monks, but actually he's in London outside of some town partying in some mansion for like a month straight when he's saying he's in India, right? Like, and I'm
Oh.
totally minimizing all of this. Like, I don't have the details
Right,
like super
right.
accurate. Again, it's something to look into though, because this man not only was influential over like he has a celebrity following, but
Yes.
even other individuals who are not big celebrities and hanging out with Kim Kardashian like I do, look at this and they're just like, wow, this guy's super influential. Look whose life he's in.
Yeah.
So the British daily newspapers questioned him, even his academic qualifications. There were
Yeah.
discrepancies in his resumes, in his degree from his business school that doesn't actually offer the courses he claims he took.
Interesting.
Like it's all kinds of craziness, right? So here
Yeah.
is this guy who has built an empire based off of lies.
Right. So that the we have a couple more people to bring into this conversation, but
Yeah.
I think it might be important to talk about me right now. Like,
I
yeah,
think
let's
it's
turn
really
it
good.
all on
Wanna
me.
talk
Yeah.
about me, wanna talk
We're gonna
about
talk about me. Okay,
if you
so I will. So at the beginning of, well, mid maybe 2021, I think is when it happened. When I say it happened, okay, I pursued larger media presence. Okay, so it didn't just happen. You don't get a reporter that suddenly knocks on your door and says, "Hey," well, maybe you do sometimes if you have a outlandish TikTok video. I've seen people that suddenly they use their video and they're on, Today News or whatever it is. Like that's rare. But
so you
anyway,
pursued this for what? Your business?
for
For what?
y yeah, for business, and it was easy back in 2021 because you could be interviewed virtually, right? All interviews were being done virtually, whereas now they're doing them more in studio, which makes things a little bit tougher. But
Yeah.
when I say I pursued it, I mean, I got a manager, right? So, I got a manager who pursued all the stories for me. Now, I wrote everything myself and did those things,
Yep.
but what happened was ugh, this sounds terrible. Like I got too much, right? Too many interviews and too many things like that. And I started feeling like I was talking about things that I didn't want to talk about anymore. Particularly the one subject matter that came up over and over and over again was mental health during the pandemic.
Uh,
And I kept getting asked over and over again. Now, here's the thing. When because I had a PR manager, right? So you have other people reach out, like news articles, like that. My PR manager sends out like the press release, right? And it'll get picked up, or sends out the ideas and it'll get picked up. And then they ask for certain things.
yeah.
So when a journalist comes and wants an article, they tell you the slant that they want on the article. Okay. So it's definitely not an article about what I necessarily think or know or have researched. It's, can you write something that fills the need of this slant or
Yep.
this title or, whatever. And so it started getting a lot about pandemic and mental health, pandemic. And I was like, I finally said to my PR manager, I said, I'm not writing about this anymore because I feel like I am perpetuating ideas that may or may not be true, but I'm part of the media blitz on this idea. And those media blitzes create a lot of influence on people. If you read these headlines over and over and over again, what are you going to start believing?
Yeah.
That this is true, because I see it in articles everywhere. I mean, so I would write an article about the negative impact of, the pandemic or whatever, and it would get picked up in 10 different media outlets, right? So that's 10 huge articles on this thing. And just started thinking like I can't keep perpetuating the doom and gloom
Right.
repeatedly over and
Right.
over and over again because I felt like I was influencing something that maybe didn't exist, right? To the level of that type of influence. And
Yeah.
so now whenever I read these articles, I'm like, I know how this goes. Like they ask for the slant, right?
Sure.
And then they write about the slant. So this isn't them being, having good like journalistic abilities like the Jay Shetty stuff he dug in. That's not what it is. It's like
Yeah.
I need somebody to byline my idea, my
Mhm.
not even theory. It's like I need somebody to prove my idea right. And so here's my idea. Will you write about it as correct?
Yes. That's
And
it. That's the way you said it right there. That's what it is.
mhm,
I need somebody to help just push the idea out that the way I'm viewing this is accurate, and that's the
yes.
lens we're gonna take. Like,
Yep.
there's where
Yep.
it goes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I got real burned out by this. I did
Yeah.
it for over a year. Like I got all that stuff and then I pulled way back because I felt like I couldn't be me anymore. I had to be a version of me that people wanted me to show up as. And so I pulled back from all of that, as you know, Jen. I've
Yeah.
told you this a million times, and I'm not sure that I'll get involved in it in that way anymore. If I'm going to do it again, it's going to be authentically me, right? This is
Right.
just me. We're going to do it for the podcast, you guys. Like, this is how we're going to show up to the podcast. But I also gave me this perspective of the massive influence that I have. Same thing on social media, right?
Yeah.
So, I've got a lot of people on TikTok, and sometimes I get worried that I'm like influencing them too much, right?
Mhm.
So
Mm.
I try my best to bring different angles and different topics so it's not always
Yeah.
heavy on the same thing over and over and
Yeah.
over again. So yeah, I'm feeling like we don't value the influence like we should. To know, I mean, Jen and I talked about this before about as therapists, how our words matter and they have deep meaning. And as influencers, however much I hate that word, as
Mhm.
influencers,
Mhm.
our words have value and meaning, right?
Yeah.
And we can take advantage of that, or we can acknowledge that, in ways of like, don't just take my word for it, people. Don't. Like, go
Yeah.
ahead, challenge me. It's okay. I
Yeah.
want you to. I want you to challenge me in a way that gets you out of your own confirmation bias. That's what I want to have
Right.
happen. I don't want to just write media articles to support your singular idea in
Yeah.
one way over and over and
Mhm.
over and
And
over.
and that is what social media and influencing does,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's the part that we always kinda try to tell people,
Mhm.
look at an alternative. Challenge yourself to look at something from a different view, because when you become siloed in that one view that you have, absolutely, Jay Shetty is going to look like the
Mhm.
best thing since sliced bread, and
Right.
Oprah Winfrey is going to look like the most influential, and she has been labeled one of the most powerful women in the world multiple
Yeah.
times over all the years, by the way, right? Like,
Yeah.
because that's exactly what we're she fits what makes sense to us, instead of us challenging and trying to not necessarily find people that fit what we see, but also find the people that don't, and
Right.
think twice about what it is that they're saying, because that might be part of the truth that you're just never willing to consider.
Well, so these guys have, and I had the small taste of it myself. These guys have big marketing teams and big marketing strategies and big PR behind them.
Yeah.
I had little PR behind me.
Yeah.
I loved my PR person. I still do. We're friends today, but I from those perspectives, like they've got a lot of people behind them telling them what to do, how to look, all these things to get this know, like, and trust factor going, right?
Yeah.
So to basically manipulate them, manipulate the audience to know, like, and trust.
Right.
And, I hate to say it, but I think I have a pretty trustworthy face. So everyone tells
Mm.
me I look like the Midwestern mom, right? Like I'm just,
Aw.
the trustworthy, like,
Well, would you
mhm.
rather get that, or Jen, fix your RBF all the time with your resting bitch face you have? Like, which one would you rather
Oh,
have,
I have
Terry?
one of those too, but
Oh, do
I
you?
smile a lot to not
I
show
don't
it
see it
anyway.
very often. Bring that up.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I think it's
You
easier
do, though.
when
You
you
do.
have well, when you have an honest face, I guess,
Yeah.
is the thing. And, that's again, it's a judgment call. But I think that's what you work towards if you are an influencer to know, like, and
Yeah.
trust. Now, the other side of the influencer deal are the younger influencers. I think older people, when I say older, I don't mean like ancient people. I mean anybody that's not in their 20s or early 30s, right? I think our
It's okay.
our our
You can
ages and
say that.
above. Yes, our ages and above, we have to work harder for the know, like, and trust factor
Yes.
because we're
Yeah.
not influencing our bodies, right? We're not influencing
Yeah.
fashion or makeup or things like that. So it's a
Yeah.
little bit different of an influence, right?
Yep.
But tying this back into social media, there's a lot of research on how the influencers of mental health, people
Mhm.
talking about mental health, people like are getting it wrong and they're causing more harm,
Yeah,
right?
they are, especially, you and I, before we were doing a little bit of prep for this, and there are some very big podcaster influencers out there
Mhm.
who have set the entire basis of their podcast on health and wellness and
Mental health.
self-help and
Mhm.
mental health that don't have a background. And I don't say you have to have these things, right? Like, that's not what I'm saying. There's lots of people out there who can eloquently speak about things that aren't necessarily an educated expert in it. Okay.
Mhm.
There are lots of people out there. However, the difference is as a consumer, when you are listening to some of these big names in these podcasts, thinking that they actually have lived experience with this, they are educated in this, they are an expert in this, and so therefore I need to take what they are saying as
Mhm.
because it's comfortable, right? That feels
Yes.
good, and yet
Well, it's know, like, and trust.
that's exactly what it is.
I've
Yeah.
got, mental health stuff, and so do you, right?
Yes.
Like, we are friends because we can
Yes.
commiserate on this thing
Yes.
together, and
Yep.
so it's not her spin is not it shouldn't be one of academia. We're talking about Mel Robbins, I'm just gonna throw it out here. We're talking about Mel Robbins. Now, Mel Robbins she's been through a lot
Oh,
actually
yeah.
in her stuff, so I don't wanna, dismiss that, but she hinges a lot on mental health, and she is not a mental health professional, right?
She's not.
But still, people are very influenced by her as a professional. She does interview other people, but
She does.
I'm not so sure that everyone's listening to the other person as much as they're listening to her,
Why don't
right?
why don't we talk about how this came up? So Terry, you had sent me a snippet of a recording that she did. It was just her.
Mhm. Mhm.
Why don't you talk a little bit about
I
that?
can't
Because it
remember it. Was it the ADHD one?
yes. Yeah, because it got you and I going a little bit on the influence that she has over people when talking about uh ADHD.
And medication,
Uh-huh.
particularly. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
And so her slant is the only way to fix ADHD is to medicate it.
yes.
And unmedicated ADHD is dangerous, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I'm like, we use that word treat so loosely. Treat equals, in today's world, treat equals medication. I wish people would just say that and drop the
Oh,
word treatment, because treatment can mean multiple things,
yeah.
right? It can be
Yep.
exercise, it can be
Yeah.
nutrition, it can be
Mhm.
therapy, it can be a lot of different things. But we use treat, especially when it comes to ADHD land, treat equals medicate, right?
It does, and so that for you and I, and we should back this up a little bit too to tell
Mhm.
people this. Like Terry and I actually looked at a lot of Mel's stuff when
Yes.
we were developing our podcast.
Right, because she's
Um,
doing something right, so
she is right, and so
mhm.
to say that the every but what we
Oh,
looked
she
at though.
influenced us.
She did. She influenced us. So
Yes.
we didn't know a ton about her, right? But what we knew is that like we were listening to her podcast. Some of the guests that she had on were just fantastic, right? Like I've
Yes.
listened to a few of her guests, specifically ones in the mental health field that offer these like vast arrays of ways you can view things. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's pretty cool because you're not just coming on and saying, here's the problem, here's the only solution, right? And
Right.
so I liked all of that, and so there's that piece to it. So to say that we were not influenced by her either, right, and that she didn't have that over us would be inaccurate. In fact, we were looking a
Mhm.
lot at her and what she's done.
Yes.
Now, as time went on and learning more about her, where she was born, what colleges she attended, okay, because that all mattered. She focuses because, and I'm going to say why it matters because
Mhm.
she went to law school. She
Yeah.
has a degree from Boston
She's
College
smart.
Law.
Mhm.
She's super smart, and she's been on TED Talks, she's written books,
But I
you know,
feel like she wants to be a therapist.
and when she talks, it sounds like that,
Yes.
and the part that I don't like is the more I listen inquisitively, the more I realize that there is a slant. And that
Mhm.
slant is very the ADHD one got me because I'm sitting here listening to her and there was a video too, it was on YouTube. She's got it on all of her socials and it was specifically about ADHD and it was very slanted toward this is the solution.
Yes.
And I'm looking at this going, "Oh my goodness." And
Mhm.
people eat that up.
Yes, they
Like
do.
she is so influential. And so
Mhm.
how many people can't view these things from a different side, a different perspective,
Right.
because they hear this and they go, "Well, Mel Robbins does this, she then it's gotta be a thing if she's talking about it."
Right. Because she does have that know, like, and trust
She
factor.
totally
And she's
does.
very smart. But, it's really funny because these podcasters, even Oprah Winfrey, like, I'm just gonna go out on a limb here. If y'all wanted to be therapists, why didn't you just go be therapists? Like, seriously. I feel
Because
like
we don't make any
we don't
money.
make any money, that is right.
We don't make
And
any money. We are
mm-mm,
not in limelight. Like
right.
if you want to be a big time author, big seller, big money maker, big in the market,
Mhm.
you're not a therapist. I mean, there
No,
are a
you're
few
not.
that have made it and have really brought some cool shit to the table, but
Right.
this is not
It's
the
hard. It's hard.
this is not the job for you.
Mhm.
You go into this job because it's servant leadership
Well,
and
they
you
all
care
they
and
all
you
knew that coaching is where the money is at, right?
correct. And if you notice, even in the case of her,
She
that
has a
is where
coaching
she
program,
got
doesn't
her
she?
that's what she
Mhm.
got her bang for her buck. And all of her books are based off of her coaching stuff. Like her
Mhm.
5 high habits and the 5-second rule and stop
Yep.
saying you're fine. Those are all based off of her coaching practice.
Right.
So,
It's really interesting to me because so many people don't wanna hear this stuff from a therapist, but they'll hear it from other people
yeah.
that they know, like, and trust, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's very interesting. I did see a, Reddit comment on her specifically that I wanted to read because I feel like it puts things in a little bit of perspective. She's one of the worst and most dangerous because she puts a faux academic spin but
Mhm.
rarely cites credible sources. She's the queen of studies show on her self-help content.
Yeah, and I have heard that a lot. Now I haven't went so far as to click on everything to see if she lists out all all the sources,
The
but
references I mean, I
I
don't
like,
list
where
all the
are our
references either
references
anymore,
now?
but
I don't
right.
know. Here we go being assholes, right? Like, and yet we
Yeah.
bring references on too, but we actually talk about it in a way that it's not the be all powerful reference that you need to use
Right,
to make a decision. Um,
right.
but she is the motivational speaker that has really, I mean, people, what you say, what she says is real and truth, and that's it.
And I
That's
wonder,
it.
does it actually elevate mental health, right? Does it actually elevate? I'm not sure. I don't know
Yeah,
if it elevates people or if it just keeps people in the state that they're in. I don't know, you
yeah.
know?
I don't know
I don't
that
know.
either.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But I know she's influential. And so that brings up the last person of influence that we're going to talk about. And
yeah.
that is Rachel Hollis.
Oh, got that book behind me.
Girl, wash your face, right? Like
I've got
I
one of
have
them
it
behind me.
too. And as a matter of fact, when I was publishing book number 1, which never ended up getting published, but I think that's because book number 2 is going to be way better. But anyway, um which will actually book number 2 will actually be book number 1. But
I was gonna
Rachel
say,
Hollis
I don't understand your math, damn it. You didn't put book number 1 out, so I don't
I
even
didn't
know
put
how book number 2 and you put
technically,
what are
book
you
number
saying
2
right
is
now?
book number 1.
Oh my god.
Anyway, so Rachel Hollis, like, her
Yeah.
first book was her cover. I don't know if you guys have seen the cover, um, but it's pretty her cover is pretty amazing on this book, right? Like, she
Mhm.
is I think she's wet, like, she's being splashed with water, is she not?
Yeah, she's sitting next to a fire hydrant.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and she's wet, and next to a fire hydrant. Girl, wash your
right.
face you're talking about? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so she
Yeah.
rose to fame very quickly, and similarly to Jay Shetty of today, um, Jay Shetty is being called out for using inspirational quotes that other people have that are not
Ah,
his,
sure.
okay?
Yeah.
So she had the same affliction, but, it's really tough because there's so many quotes out there that are just so good that you just put them out and, they're not yours, but who do you cite? I don't know,
Yeah.
all these things. So I hear that stuff and I'm like, "You know what? Everybody does that a time or two." Um, so that's I probably have done it. I don't know.
Sure.
Um, I don't do it intentionally. Sometimes I do like, oh, that's a cool quote, but I'll make sure that the name is still on it or not cut it off, right?
Right.
Anywho, different
Yeah.
thing. But anyway, so she was I want to read this part because I can't say it any better than what I'm reading. The
Okay.
downfall of motivational speaker Rachel Hollis was inevitable. Her perfectly curated life which often came accompanied by a stream of cliched inspirational quotes, created a persona that seemed almost unbelievable. And
Mm.
while constructing a fake reality hardly seems remarkable on social media, Hollis's brand as a self-reliant hashtag girl boss found itself in her numerous self-help books, a podcast, and conferences, all preaching the message you and only you are ultimately responsible for how happy you are. Um, which I agree with, actually. I think happiness
Yeah.
is an inside job, but you
I
can't find it
yeah.
in certain situations, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what happened was she and her husband built this empire too, and then they started doing relationship coaching and a relationship podcast and all this stuff, and then suddenly they got divorced. He
Yeah.
unfortunately ended his life after that too. So,
Yes.
but I think that it, that is a I don't know, culmination of curating a life that is not real and having to live within the constructs of that life and then being
Yeah.
horribly criticized for it later. Like, so I feel for the situation. Many people feel that she was manipulative and they were manipulated by her and all this stuff, and I can see that too, right? I can see
Sure. Yeah.
all sides of this, and I think mostly you were just influenced by her. You wanted to be her, right?
Yeah.
Like, you wanted things that she had, and there's this marketing concept out there too. It's called attraction marketing, and that is basically what most influencers were doing for quite a while. I think it's becoming a little more authentic in this
Yeah.
presentation now, but at the time, it was attraction marketing, and it's basically doing things and showing people what you have, quote unquote.
Yeah.
You may or may not have those things, right? You may take a picture of yourself in front of a fancy car or in a penthouse, right? And not giving any context to it. And so
Yeah.
people think you live in the penthouse when you just went to an open house, I don't know, whatever it
Right.
was. But,
Right.
curating
Yeah.
a life that is not yours, and then you have to sustain that curation, right?
Yeah,
And
because
that
when you don't, your empire falls, right? Like it
exactly,
falls. So you've
exactly.
got to keep that up, right? And I
Right.
think about that even when I was talking about Jay Shetty. I'm
Mhm.
like, how much did you I have a feeling that people get to a point, even maybe Rachel Hollis, right? And I don't know, where and she actually talks about this for one of her books, some of the controversy with one of her books. She blamed some of the way in which things had turned out when she was called on the carpet for some of the false things that were said in the book that
Mhm.
aren't like things were mismarketed, right? Like somebody's quote wasn't actually hers, but it was spun into there. And she actually blamed some of this on not following her gut and listening
Mm.
to her production team and the team that was helping her put this together, because
Yep.
that book, like some of the other things that we read and see, is slanted. And so there is this whole team in the background going, listen, this might sound good for you, but this isn't going to sell shit. So
Okay,
we
so
need to
I
stretch
need to
this a bit.
interject here. I wanna interject because the reason I never published that first book was
Yeah,
twofold.
you need to share this. Yep, you
Okay.
do. Share
So
it.
the first was this was during a time when publishing a book was social proof. Okay. And so social proof means, oh, look at her. She's done all these things. She's got a book. She's got the podcast. She's got
Yep,
all of the things she has. She is somebody. Okay. So that was number 1. The number 2 was that the person that was helping me publish the book, we'll call him the editor, right? The editor had a very prescribed way of putting this book together. And so I had to fill in the gaps of I'll call it the outline, right? Fill in the
okay.
gaps of the outline, right? And
Yep,
it was not me. It was not me. So
yeah,
although I'm sitting here going, I have to write this book, right? I have to do this. This is one of the things that everyone's telling me to do. You need to write a book. You need to write a book, write a book, write a book. So I'm like, all right, I have to write this book. And so I'm writing this book, and I am literally just grinding, grinding on this thing. To the point where I put it down. I put it down. I put it down forever. I buried it in all eternity because it will never see the light of day. Because could it have been a good book? It was probably a decent book because I usually don't do things half-assed anyway, but it was probably a decent
yeah,
book,
tell me about it.
but it wasn't my book. It wasn't my book.
Exactly. That's
And
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes. So it felt so uncomfortable even trying to put this book together, which is why it didn't come together easily, or even quickly, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And not that I want it to come together quickly, but it wasn't authentic to me. It was a prescribed way to market something, right? And that's all that it was. It was a marketing tool, right? And I wanted it to be a service tool, right? Like a
Yeah.
tool of service. And
Yeah.
that's not what it was. So it never saw the light of day. Um, yeah.
So there you go. That's the difference between something that you've been through, okay,
Mhm.
and someone who maybe made it big now, but at the cost of fame and influence came losing your authenticity.
And
And
I
then you
think
have
I
to
think
sustain
that
that model.
happens. Yeah, that happens so frequently. And,
Yeah.
there's part of me that's like, I really would like to, have more influence in our field, right? Like I'd really like to train people and I'd really like to help the field shift a little bit, but I don't want to do it at the expense of me.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And when I was caught up in all of that stuff, which is probably why I minimize it a little bit today, like when I talk about all the articles I've had and public appearances and all that,
Yeah, you do.
I
You are
really,
very humble with it. I can't
yeah,
even get you to, like, just, like, give yourself a huge attaboy half the time when I'm, like, talking about the things that you've done because it's almost like there's a
there's a
There's a
disconnect
there's
there.
there is a disconnect or a shame tie or something because you
Hmm.
also know some of that too, right?
Yeah.
But that's what it is. That's what influences us,
Hmm.
right? And so that's the difference between you and some of those other individuals, right?
Hmm.
So here are people that put things out, whether it's anyone that's considered an influencer, right? That may have to alter the way in which they're putting something out to
Yes.
fit the picture that is needed, right? The you said it really well, right? Like there was an agenda laid out. There was a strategic
Mhm.
way in which this book needed to look. So here's what you're going to do. You just fill the holes in, but by
Yep.
filling the holes in, it actually equated to things that were not authentic for you.
Not
And
at
even
all.
the
It's like,
way yeah.
and
Yeah,
I'm like,
and so
no.
because they're people who do this, your background teams, right? Which, you
Mhm.
know what? I hope someday we get to a point where you and I with this podcast have a background team, but
Yeah,
we
me
do it
too. It'd be so much easier.
but we're gonna do it differently though, because as
Right.
much as it's gonna be, listen, you girls wanna go make some big coin, here's how you're gonna change a few things. If those few things are gonna conflict with you and I and what authentically we believe,
Mhm.
and if because I'm
I'm
not
not
selling
doing it.
I sold
We
my
see
soul to the devil for 15 years. I'm not doing it
Yes.
anymore, right? Like,
Jen and I had this
no,
conversation. We had this
like
conversation when
we
we
yes,
were
and we can talk
talking
about
about the
that
podcast.
too.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
we
we're
did.
like, we're only gonna partner with people that feel authentic to us to partner with. We're not gonna sell our soul to anybody,
Yep,
to do this, and that might make this podcast grow slower. I don't
very
know. That
slow.
that
Yeah,
yeah, that might make
yeah,
or because we're leading with authenticity, it might not, you
maybe
know?
not.
It
Yeah,
might not. And so I refuse to give up parts of me for the sake of money and influence, right? Now, could this come with some money and influence later on? It definitely could, but I'm still not going to give up me to get there,
to get
okay?
there.
Like,
Yep. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, if you're going to work with me, you're going to work with me, right? You're not gonna work with some avatar version of me to fit your
That's it.
marketing needs,
That's
because
exactly
that's
it.
that's all this is. If you don't know this already, like, the people who win have the
Yeah,
best marketing, and
they
I
do.
think I said that to Jen too in the early I said, "People who win have the best marketing." And whether it's a marketing team or they just know how to do the marketing, right?
Yeah,
So we could have a real shit podcast, which by the way, we don't, but we could have a real shit podcast and have a really great marketing team.
yeah,
Now we could have real crap marketing and have a really awesome podcast, right? That
yeah,
nobody will see, right? So,
yeah.
you do need marketing, but to do it at the expense of
Your
you, like,
own yeah, your authenticity, that's
yes,
where it stops, at the expense of authenticity. That's where the
yes,
buck stops,
it
and for a
does
lot of
for
the
some
influencers,
people. For
Yeah, and for
some
a lot of
people.
influencers, it doesn't,
Mhm,
right? So that is why we see these controversial things that come
mhm,
out, right? When whether
yep,
we're talking about the things that Oprah has been through and what she advertises now,
mhm,
we're talking about Rachel Hollis and the controversy with her. We're talking about Jay Shetty, all of those individuals, right? The empire will typically crumble at some point
mhm.
if you can't keep up the facade you
Facade.
created. Yeah,
Mhm,
really, right, like and so, yeah, some of it may be very genuine and very real, but along the way, it starts to slant itself, and,
yep,
you
does.
firsthand got experience on that,
Mhm,
multiple different venues here. I mean, whether it was through marketing, I'm sure you saw that at, Good Morning America
mhm.
when you did your internship there, I mean, you're gonna see slants
It's
all the
all
time.
curated, it's all
Everything.
curated.
Yeah,
E
everything is,
everything
right?
you want. Mhm.
Yeah, and so that's really the basis of what we're hitting hard today is this idea of just knowing that the things that influence you are slanted. It doesn't matter who it is, like the big influencers, right? And just getting curious about it.
So, real quickly before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I found an article, and again, this is not research, but, Jay Shetty's picture is right on it. Um, 13 characteristics of the most influential people. And I
Oh,
thought I thought this was important, at least the top few, right?
okay.
Number 1, I take aim with a little bit. Number 1 is they aim to help others succeed. And I'm like, do they though? Some, I mean, in helping others, they succeed, I guess. So I guess if they're leading with that. So this is the only one that I'm like curious about because
Yeah.
I don't think everybody goes out there to help someone succeed.
No. And
Yeah.
some do though, right? And some do. Like the whole
Yeah.
basis of them getting big is to share their story so that it can
Sure.
help others. Yep. So
But
that one's kind of
these that one's iffy, but the
yeah,
next 3 I think are probably the biggest ones. They're charismatic. They've got a
yeah.
lot of charisma. They are world-class communicators. That makes
Sure.
sense, right? You
Yeah,
have a
it does.
firm grasp of language and words and how to use them, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yep, use your big
And
words.
yes, and they are boldly confident.
Yeah.
Boldly confident.
Boldly, overly
Boldly
confident. They're
confident.
they're they're the one that walks into the room and you know exactly who the hell they are, and
Yes.
they can
Or at
morph.
least they present as
Yep.
boldly confident, and that might be the problem is if there's that again, that disconnect there. Like
Yeah.
if you really aren't boldly confident and you're trying to be, and
Yeah.
then that will at some point get in your
It
way,
it
you
it
know?
will, because 'cause you're gonna find
Mhm.
yourself in circumstances where you're scared shitless, and
Mhm.
especially public circumstances or you're
Yeah.
out doing something, right? And you have to keep that facade up, but really that was all a facade and
Mhm.
you can't manage it. Yeah,
Yep.
100%. Like,
Yeah.
give me someone who's super influential that can't communicate, that does not present themselves, okay, does not
I
present
don't know.
themselves in a very bold manner,
Right.
confident, overly confident manner,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And doesn't necessarily wanna assist or help people, they don't tie that in, like, give me a big person who can do that.
Yeah. I don't
Give me
know
a
'cause
name of somebody
I
who's
think
just
in those early days of Jen and I working together, I think I may have said, and if I didn't, I'll say it now. Shameless self-promotion is
yeah,
also part of this. And in shameless self-promotion, you have to appear as confident in some way
yep,
to be able to say, hey, look, what I've got is what you want, right?
yep,
Or what you need, right? Even bigger.
mhm,
Um, but if you can't lead with that, then you've got problems, right? So and to be fair to this conversation, like I'm still trying to find out, and I think this podcast is helping me. I'm still trying to find out how to present more authentically me, um, on air, off air, all the things.
all of it,
Because,
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I'm a very different person when I'm sitting at home on my couch than I am in a therapy session or online or like there's like many different styles of me, right?
yeah,
So I also know that I don't have to be just one thing and
yep,
present because that creates a false persona as well because there's no way I could just keep this up all day. Like, it's pretty tough. But even you, Jen, when you're online, not online, when you're on air on the radio, like,
oh,
I
sure.
mean, that's a version of you, you know?
It absolutely is, which is a
Mhm.
little bit different of a version of me, like, because that's I mean, you're performing.
Right.
I am nothing. I am an influencer on the air, right? Is what I'm
Right.
doing. And
You're a performer.
and so that's
Mm.
something really is what I am doing because I'm not stumbling on my words. I sound quite confident when I'm talking, even if I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I could pull that shit right on my ass, which is,
Yep.
one of the
Yep.
things that you can do. We can banter, we can volley with words, and it comes and it's witty, right? And so
Mhm.
that is a form of influence as well.
Yep.
Because when I'm not on the radio, even I'm a little different here than I am on air too. That's a very different, right? So than when I'm with my clients or when I'm with my family. Now, a chunk of what I've brought in though now in my world in the last year is continuing to just bring more of me in because that's
Well, here, number 6, they're humble. 7, they're great listeners. Um, they take responsibility for themselves, and they're knowledge seekers who think outside the box. I think
oh
I think
shoot
we
we
just defined
I
ourselves.
think
Oh
we
my
just
god.
tackled this. Wait, so does this so we finished this episode by full circling back to this idea that don't be influenced, and yet Dr. Terry and I have a lot of these qualities of these influencers, but
We
don't
do, but we're gonna
don't
use these qualities for good rather than
yeah,
evil.
it's a superpower for good,
For
it's to
good.
take down the bad guys, not to perpetuate the shit is what
Yes,
it's about, right? So
100%.
yeah,
All right, well, that's a wrap, and make
it
sure
is
that
a
you
wrap.
guys like, comment, share, do all the things, and we love your feedback,
So
and basically, we're gonna end this with 2 superheroes, no sidekicks.
yeah.